Hello, everyone, and welcome to Unity's official live stream. I'm your usual host, Hassan, and I'm back with another episode of Unity Tales, the show where we highlight interesting personalities and stories from the Unity community to learn more about their personal journeys in and around Unity. So, for our second episode of Unity Tales, we have a guest who's doing something really unique with how they operate their studio. It's a model which he calls the constellation model, and it was really eye-opening for me the first time I heard about it. So I hope we can all learn something new or get inspired by how our guest runs his game studio. The guest is Xalavier Nelson Jr. and his studio is Strange Scaffold. Before we bring Xalavier on to introduce himself, let's take a look at the game that his studio just released, named Sunshine Shuffle. So let's cut to the trailer for that. So you can get that game right now. There's a link to it in the description of the video, and we'll drop a link to the chat as well. Also want to say that I said Xalavier, actually pronounced Xalavier. My bad. Xalavier, welcome. Thanks for joining. So happy to have you.
It's a pleasure to be here.
How are you doing? So
I'm doing good. I'm sick on a Wednesday, which is a good time to be sick, but it also feels very weird. You're in a shadow realm of days, and it seems like you'll be sick forever.
Well, honestly, I really appreciate you coming on, even though you're a bit under the weather. You're soldiering through, so I really appreciate that, and I'm sure the audience does as well. Honestly, it's going to be such an interesting show today because, like I said in the intro, this is the way you operate your studio is super unique. It's really interesting, and it's been working. Which is, and so I think there's a lot we can learn from it, and we're going to dive into all of that. What this thing you call the constellation model. We have questions in the chat already asking what ethical authorship means. So we're going to go over that and what you mean by that. But I'd like to start, in the beginning, closer to the beginning, just who you are at a high level, and then I want to get into how you actually got into games, and then therefore game dev after that. So if you could just give us a quick introduction to who is Xalavier.
Xalavier Nelson Jr. is a BAFTA nominated studio head, writer, narrative person. I've worked on over 70 games in the past 8 years. I also have work in comics and literature and tabletop RPGs, a variety of mediums, a variety of places, and having worked on so many genres, so many games, now having run my own studio for the past 4 years, alongside continuing to have collaborations with people across the industry at all scales, from indie to AAA, I have a uniquely holistic view of what it means to make a game and how you get a game from being in development to shipping. So talking to people through this lens, providing that input, and really digging into how do we make games better, faster, cheaper, and healthier is, at this point, my life's purpose, and something I'm deeply grateful to have the opportunity to talk about.
And you've done it multiple times so far, right? You've delivered on games multiple times. You've worked on how many games so far?
I think I'm at 77 total on the game dev side, and Strange Scaffold in the past 4 years has delivered about 8.
8 games in 4 years. So not your typical development cycle, you could say. Yeah, and people watching are probably like, how does that happen? How do you even pull that? I'm sure a lot of people want to do the same thing, right? A lot of people want to have so many ideas, but they don't want to be stuck on one idea for 4, 5, 6 years straight. And you're not that way. You're jumping through multiple game ideas, and we're gonna talk about that. But I'd love to talk about your intro to games, the game world. Did you start when you were young? How were you introduced to video games?
I started in video games really young.
Okay.
I was always wanting to be in the games industry,
Yeah.
but at the age of 12, I learned that game journalists get games for free. I've since also discovered that the working conditions don't enable people to really have a sustainable livelihood on the journalism side of things. The pay is low, the work is very time and effort intensive, and the career path seems to have a definite plateau. But I was 12, so I wasn't thinking about that, and I didn't know anyway. All I heard was games for free, and I decided that that was kind of the objectively perfect job. So I pretended to be an adult on the internet
Yeah.
to get my first jobs, and somehow that worked.
I guess you're not going to tell us which companies you worked for because you.
Nope.
Yep. And by the way, for everyone who's watching right now, this is not pre-recorded. This is indeed live. I'm getting some comments, and yes, Xalavier's mic mod is very unique.
Absolutely.
Just a tangent that people can't seem to ignore it, so we have to address it.
Living that indie life, I got I upgraded my entire sort of audio setup, especially since we are doing full-on voice and album recording for El Paso Elsewhere, an upcoming Max Payne spiritual successor throwback third-person shooter that we're making.
Yeah.
And for regular streams and stuff as well, wanted to make sure I had a good audio setup, got a good microphone, got a little pop filter or whatever. I had some audio friends tell me that the pop filter I got was not adequate. And actually, their trick of the trade was get a mason jar lid. The type of thing that you would typically stick a little metal thing inside of to actually seal a mason jar. And put that on top of your existing pop filter, put a sock on top of that, and you have this essentially a professional quality noise gator. So it becomes a fun topic of conversation, and it is much cheaper than a multitude of other options.
And it is audio engineer approved.
Audio engineer approved.
So,
don't ask me which audio engineers, because I don't know if they'd want to be associated with it, but I've had it approved. I promise.
And hey, you sound great, so proof's in the pudding. So there you go. But yeah, I love that story. You just wanted to get games, so you started writing about games. So your career started with writing, and where did it go from there? So you got some jobs, you're making some money on the side, doing some writing at the age of 12 for certain media outlets, which shall not be named, and then.
At first, it wasn't paid, of course.
Okay.
Especially because I was a 12-year-old and the writing was not good.
Okay.
But it managed to exist at the level of the enthusiast press, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I thank God for this, but at every point in my game dev career, I didn't just ask how I could get my foot in the door. I was actively interrogating what I loved about what I was doing, what would keep me personally sustainable in the field that I was entering. So from games journalism, I got into games writing. From games writing, I got into narrative design. I worked on things like Hypnospace Outlaw and Skatebird and Slayer Shock and a variety of other really cool things.
Cool.
And I realized as a narrative designer, I didn't particularly care how good the narrative was. I knew I could tell a good story. I'd done it several times with great teams. That didn't matter to me, though. What mattered to me was that the game released and that it did so with the least amount of human harm. So I did a bunch of multi-classing into things like biz dev and production and management and direction, and ultimately ended up in this place where I still do game design and narrative design and writing, but also a lot of production design and management and direction. And I have a hybrid of skills and things that I do every day, almost all of which fit within the wheelhouse of things that bring me joy and give me at least the energy to do them, because I spent essentially my entire career focusing on what would keep me in a place to have that perspective and continue long term.
Yeah. Okay. So you were really thinking long term from the beginning, which is really impressive and very mature for somebody who started this so young. And I wonder, there are a lot of people who go through life and like they're late in life and they still don't know what they want to do. What is it about your, maybe this is too much of a deep question, but what is it about your upbringing or your interaction with the medium so early on that made you realize what you wanted to do? So, like, what made it so clear for you so early?
I think a big part of my upbringing, at least, was finding something to do
Okay.
and doing it well. I was homeschooled. We used a
Mm.
specific method called unschooling. And the entire process of unschooling is life itself is a journey of learning. If a
Mhm.
kid is really interested in pirates, you don't force him to read American history books. You let him go to the library and look into a bunch of stuff about pirates and organically learn about American history through its interaction with piracy and privateers
Mm.
in the early 1800s. Well, it's actually not doing a great job reflecting on the homeschool upbringing here, but
It's all
1700s,
good.
1800s general
Yeah.
time range.
Mhm.
Um, Organically exploring topics and subjects from a place of passion in the first place,
Okay.
sustaining that passion and finding how to, for mandatory subjects and things you aren't interested in, how
Interesting.
to bring
Interesting.
your transferable passion over. So in that way, it pretty organically segued from that into a professional workplace and asking the same questions. What do I love about what I'm doing here? And what do I not love? And how do those two things interact for a long-term career where we have to do things we don't love sometimes, obviously,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of ways in which we can individually approach those things or the processes behind those things that might actually make those things bearable, sustainable, or enjoyable long term.
Wow. So you learned how to learn and how to self-reflect and be critical from a very young age, and that kind of sent you on this journey up until this point. Okay. And then you said you transitioned to writing for studios. So like Skatebird you mentioned and a few other games. How did you get into those positions? Right, like there are a lot of people who like are chasing that for God knows how long. So to jump right into the games industry, I mean that couldn't have been as simple as just sending out a resume, could it? Like what did you
Absolutely
do?
not.
Yeah.
In my case, for pretty much every major thing I've done in my career, it started with doing the work in the first
Uh-huh.
place.
Uh-huh.
I ended up getting journalism jobs by at first writing for my own websites and being awful for a long time as a 12-year-old, 13-year-old writing reviews and so on until I got all the bad words out and some of the words started to be good. Then in a similar way, when it came to things like writing for games, a lot of people want to do that. I just started writing games with the resources that I had, operating from the very specific place that I was in at that moment and trying to do special things there. So I was actually about to leave the games industry because I was approaching
Okay.
adulthood. And the typical statistic is that within 3 to 5 years, most game developers burn out so much physically or mentally that they're no longer able to participate in the medium.
Yeah.
So from 12 to 17, 18, I had already seen 1 to 2 cycles of that.
Yeah.
And it was scary because
Mhm.
all my peers and mentors and people who I thought I'd be growing alongside forever suddenly are gone. And having even the experience as a journalist of covering a video game and being very excited for it, and the developer just drops off the face of the earth was a lot to absorb for a
Yeah.
teenage mind. So I was going to leave the medium, but I thought I would make one game first. And I did not have Unity skills at the time. So operating from what I knew, which was how to work with text, I made a little game in Twine called All Hail the Spider God. And people liked it. And even more so than people liking it, I realized I loved the process of actually working with video games on the development side of things. So from there, I kept making the small Twine games that were within my own personal wheelhouse of technical skill sets at the time. Things
Yeah.
like Screw You Bear Dad, which got attention in the uh, IF Comp, they call it, the interactive fiction competition that runs every year, as well as other projects, and my longstanding already sort of existence within the industry. I got to transition that initial personal work into my first bits of professional work, working on things like Slayer Shock. Big
Mm-hmm.
thanks to David Pittman for taking a chance on me, as well as things like We Are the Caretakers. And this, not all of these projects are completely in order, but transitioning personal work into the professional realm is something that has consistently worked for me. Even in comics, I've now done,
Yeah.
outside of my own personal work in comics, a comic I'm really excited for people to get a chance to look at in the literary journal, A Profound Waste of Time, which is about the culture of making video games and what it means to make video games. And that all came from me saying, you know what, I've always wanted to work in comics. Instead of waiting for that opportunity to come along, I'm going to find a way to do it at my scope, at my scale, in a way that
Yeah.
doesn't break the bank or destroy me in the process. And now I've got this thing in my resume that just continues to, even if it doesn't get a job, it's an example of how wide a breadth of material I can do.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people have within their own power. If you're thinking of making the next Grand Theft Auto, suddenly video games and video game development and becoming a video game writer doesn't seem very feasible.
Starts
But
to feel
if you
impossible.
work your way from where you're at and what you know
Yeah.
and build up from there, suddenly you do have an active road to success and really growing in the medium.
Mm-hmm. And that seems to be a recurring theme with everything that you do is scoping appropriately, working by your means, so to speak, working with your limitations. You did that with your writing early on, and then you didn't have Unity skills, Twine, and then it also reflects in the games that you're making today with the method that you've taken on, which is this constellation model, which also kind of works with focusing on scope first and then building from there, right? So I guess that would be this is a good moment to like talk about that model and maybe actually first, did that model come first or did Strange Scaffold as a studio come first? Or did they come hand in hand? Or did they happen at the same time?
So the dirty secret of scoping that is, again, not enabled by a lot of games industry patterns, especially as budgets grow and timelines become longer and we keep making these bigger and bigger games at every scale, from indie to AAA. I've seen the typical indie budget literally go from 100,000 to 1 to 3 million in the past roughly 5-6 years. And this is in the publisher world. So within that scope, when you're working on one thing, you have a very limited amount of information and you finish that thing, cool, and you're still in the video games industry, great. But you only have one game under your belt to think about scope and what it means to make another game.
That's true.
So the more you work on things, the better your ability to judge scope, to judge effort, to judge collaboration strategy and what works for you. And games doesn't often give people the opportunity to explore that. So on my end, what I gained over time working on a lot of things simultaneously as a contractor, as a developer, very early on in my game dev career, was a perspective that said, hey, the conditions under which you make something, the process of it, is indistinguishable from the product. If you change your process, you change what you're making in a fundamental way. If a game has to earn back $1.2 million the same day or the same month that it releases, you're going to approach its entire development cycle in a very different way than, say, if $100,000 is on the line, or 50,000 or 10,000. And in games, especially with the power of things like Unity, which Strange Scaffold uses for most of its projects, you can build a really good game for amounts of money that people say are impossible.
Yeah.
We've made games at Strange Scaffold for $1,000. And then we've made games for, going into that 6-figure range as well, and working with others and going into like 7-figure ranges.
Right.
And the it might seem that the perspective does not scale between those two levels, but it does. The key is just if you can find a unifying principle or perspective to give you that road. So for the constellation model, Strange Scaffold was initially built upon a series of principles from all the work I'd been doing previously and personally up to that point. I knew I didn't want anyone I worked with to, based off of whether or not my next weird idea worked out, I didn't want anyone to have to lose their house or not be able to feed their family. I knew that I wanted to not overextend myself or the people who I worked with. I knew that a lot of things happened in the course of game development, so I wanted to build games organically that could accommodate flexible production schedules. We have, as many people do, again, dirty secret of games is that this is all occurring, right? Bereavements, sicknesses, critical changes in your lifestyle across the country moves. These things are all happening at independent game developers and AAA game developers all the time.
Absolutely.
There's just no accommodation for it within the development schedule. You still owe your publisher milestones. You still owe your team deliverables so that they aren't slowed down. And I wanted to make a game production schedule that could accommodate people who, as people tend to do, are growing and shifting and changing over time. So coming from that basis of the things I wanted and the things I knew I needed, I built from the ground up, a studio that supported and emphasized those things. And over time, as I have changed, the studio itself has accordingly changed a bit. There's a lot of discussion transparently with people inside of the studio, whether they've worked with us for a couple of weeks to years on end, of how that thought is evolving. But at its core, it is kind of a constant self-calibration of what it means to make games that are best supported by the process through which they're being made.
Right. And I guess it's a model that takes into account, as you say, that like life happens, and it's life happens, and it's not like making the games is not entirely separate from like the lives of the developers who are working on it, right? It's you're kind of like bringing it together in a sense, and it's accounting for things that happen in their lives. So you say that, but I'm sure people are still curious what that actually means. So like say you're building a game and you have an animator who's key to the process, but you know unfortunately somebody in their family has gone ill, right? And they need to take care of them, and the deadline is coming up in a month, right? How does the constellation model account or work with that?
We actually had that exact situation happen
really?
earlier this year.
Yeah.
So when someone on our team dealt with a critical family illness, they said, I have to take a step back from the studio. And because we as a studio are built around, again, trying to ethically work with contractors, provide this environment of flexibility where we pay people at indie rates or above them in order to fairly compensate them for their time and put them in a place of stability for working with us in the hours they have outside of their main day job. We were able to come in and say, okay, this person has had a critical family illness. We have more animators that we could source.
Right.
So when that happened, not only did we have someone on deck who could support us in that regard, because we have animators working on other projects at the studio. So it was like, hey, this higher priority thing, are you interested? Can you help us with this? We were able to, the term constellation, we were able to redraw that constellation in the way that made sense. And that period of time passed in that person's life. And a few months later, they were like, hey, I could use a job.
Yeah.
Do y'all still have space for me? And because we build just frankly more flexible production schedules, we were able to say, actually, you get to take some animation off that person's plate now. Right. And that person has ended up affecting more of the game dev cycle than they would be able to contribute to in any other studio or setup. And that other animator at the studio got to work with multiple constraints because they had not only their main project, but this other project at the studio that they were able to learn from and grow in, having touched both things at the time. It is frankly astounding to me that for video games, this deeply flexible, multidisciplinary game medium,
Hmm.
we have so little accommodations for giving people active support and honestly having the priority of growing those people and helping them figure out what they care about and what they need as they build things. Because when that occurs, I mean, this isn't altruistic. I'm trying to do it for altruistic reasons, but it's frankly also just makes great business sense. The people who I work with grow so much in the process of working with us, even if sometimes that means that they depart from the studio or they depart for a period of time.
Yeah.
Then again, they aren't halted in their personal progress by working with us. It just means that if someone sticks with us or comes back, it's because they want to be here. And because the
Right.
things that they're contributing to, they're being fairly compensated
Yeah.
for doing interesting work. Everyone can have this. It's a matter of, is it your priority?
And I'm sure that that flexibility that that Strange Scaffold offers is extremely attractive to developers. And so you probably have a pretty large pool or Rolodex of people you can call to, right?
Not including external partners, we have roughly 78 people now in the constellation. And that number continues to grow. And those aren't active staff all happening at the same time. Obviously, at a certain point, it just becomes a self sustaining creative community where
Wow.
there's people who haven't worked with us in months or years, but they're
Yeah.
still able to participate in that community to whatever degree they wish. And when we look for artists, for example, we've recently been looking for 3D artists,
Hmm.
we're able to say, hey, roughly 80 people who we can trust and who we've worked with before. Is there anyone you would recommend? Is there places that we should be looking so that we have a more diverse hiring pool?
Right.
And we get exponential benefit from creating that space in people's lives.
That's incredible. And what one thing that comes to mind is like, okay, there's people jumping in and out of the projects, but yet when you play the games, feels like there's a consistent vision regardless. And so the question might be, a studio, somebody else might argue, uh, you got to maintain the same people for the 3-year project to maintain consistency in the project. What would you say to that?
There's certain cases where that's absolutely the case.
Okay.
There's even strange scaffold projects where if you were to replace a certain person or set of collaborators on a project, it would fundamentally change or not be shippable at all.
Mm-hmm.
In our case, we're still working around that.
Yeah.
And it's, again, a matter of walking into a lot of these situations with our eyes wide open.
Mm-hmm.
So, one thing that we talk about pretty frequently is the games we make feel like they come from a single holistic vision.
Okay.
And I play a large role on all of them, which means that other people have the flexibility to come in and out based off their capacity, but I don't. There's
Right.
flexibility and even perhaps healthy accommodations for other people
That's
except
interesting.
for me.
Interesting.
And it's not great,
Yeah.
but I did that on purpose.
Okay.
I wanted that to be a core piece of the studio.
Yeah.
I knew how much risk is associated with keeping a studio open. I know how heartbreaking it is to have a workplace shut down and to have kind of this graveyard of studio titles, all different names, all working from first principles to try to build their next thing. Maybe thing will be the hit that gives them the cash and the personnel
Right.
and the exact situation that allows them to continue. So I built a studio that doesn't work without me. I'm the one piece that can't move.
Hmm.
And there's advantages that gives us and there's compromises. And that's the big thing I advocate for in all of these circumstances, which is not work like Strange Scaffold. Frankly, for a lot of people, that would be madness, and I wouldn't recommend it. But I am saying, as much as you have that capacity based off of your investors and your funding partners, for example, who are giving you the resources to be able to do this in the first place, I would say you gotta take on these compromises and approach them intentionally. Because if your studio structure is internally inconsistent, one way or another, it's going to show up in the final game. Or if it doesn't, it's going to make your life harder.
Yeah. Okay.
And game development is already hard enough.
It's hard enough. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And do you envision like a V2.0 version of this model where some more of the pressure is taken off of you? Because it's like the model, it sounds, and it is very compassionate to all those around you, but maybe not as compassionate to yourself. So I wonder if you're ever thinking up a version of this where you can allow yourself not to be this critical breaking point to the process. Coming in with all the hard questions.
I would say that, first off, there is one small advantage to being that critical breaking point, which is that if people want more Strange Scaffold games, they need to protect my life. If a bus is coming, you're gonna have to sacrifice yourself if you want Teenage Demon Slayer Society to come out. And having an industry full of bodyguards
is beautiful. It's a beautiful thing, really. You go to GDC, you feel safer than anywhere else.
I'm surrounded by so many potential human shields. That's what you're really trying to gather. It's not a network. It's not a set of connections.
It's an army.
LinkedIn. It's an army. So there's that. But what a 2.0 of Strange Scaffold looks like, and actually where the studio is looking to move forward in the future, is we've made games of all kinds of scales at this point.
Yeah.
We've made wild open world comedy adventure games built on stock photos. We built a sci-fi body horror market tycoon. We built a game for interactive exhibitions work. So Meow Wolf, we collaborated with them. You might be familiar with them. They have permanent exhibitions across the United States that are this combination of ARG and museum and interactive storytelling showcase. We just made a game for them within our principles at our scope that they were apparently very excited about. And having worked at those scales and now having our biggest project yet, even just in terms of pure funding and logistics, it has a full rap album. It has, this is El Paso Elsewhere. Yeah. It has a giant ambition in terms of being a throwback third-person shooter, a supernatural neo-noir showcase in which a black monster hunter goes into a dimension-shifting motel that continues to swerve between hotel hallways to Egyptian corridors and beyond to kill the monster he loved before she ends the world. The 2.0 of Strange Scaffold is really for purposes of long-term survival. I love that we've been able to work high and low, but the 2.0 of Strange Scaffold, I think, is never making something this big again, for example.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I love that we have this creative ambition inside of us and that we've been able to take care of the people who have made this game as we embark on our largest journey yet. This game comes out this fall, but I think a 2.0 of Strange Scaffold, to continue to reduce that burden and be compassionate to me, is, for example, not trying to sustain enough projects personally on my own back that can keep people employed, keep 78 plus people employed. I think being really mindful of the type of things I want to make and how I want to make them, and that Strange Scaffold, frankly, is one of the few people in the industry who can make a game for, say, $40,000, and that's something that's profitable for us and calculated for market success.
Right.
We just lean into that direction even harder after El Paso Elsewhere. And giving myself that space to say, we are powerful when we work small, and doing our utmost to create that accommodation
Mhm.
for alternatives to the way the video games industry is working, to no matter what is the current trend of the day, whether it's people saying now you have to put NFTs in your game or else it's going to be a failure. Separating ourselves from those market whims
Yeah.
and investment whims entirely, and
Trends.
just being like, you know what? Nope. We don't need anything from you, which means that we get to collaborate with you on our own terms.
Yeah.
That's really exciting. It's where we currently are, but we are a little bit strained and continuing to lean smaller and shine our light for others to follow in their own unique, beautiful way. It's something I'm
Hmm.
really excited for, and that's something I'm looking to pursue going forward.
Amazing. So V2, a more balanced workload for V2. Uh,
Balanced workload and smaller. Yeah.
Smaller. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I really want to talk also about authorship and vision. It's like things we've touched upon, but I
Mm.
want to go deeper into it. And this idea of maintaining this vision for a project and having it feel directed, right? Like one person in particular's vision in the project, while still having everyone else in the project feel seen, right? Because a project can be so driven by one person that everyone else can feel like just a cog in the machine, but that's not how you want to run Strange Scaffold, and that's not how you run Strange Scaffold. So what are you doing to maintain your vision in your projects? Uh, have your writing come through, have yourself, have Xalavier come through in the project, but still have everybody else who you're working with feel seen and feel like an important part of the process. And let me know if there's anything more to ethical authorship.
I would say ethical authorship exists on two levels. One is
Mhm.
visibility and one is development process. So
Mhm.
visibility is, I don't say I make Strange Scaffold games alone. Even when I'm only referring to myself wearing a bunch of hats, I still use the term we, because I get to make the incredible things that I do thanks to the support of a wide range of collaborators, folks on our production team like Amanda Farrow and Caetano, and
Yeah.
newcomers like Candice Hudair.
Mhm.
We have people we've worked with for a long time, like Tom Benita, folks like uh, Dan Pierce, and at this point, I'm just listing off names, but Space Warlord Orchestrating Simulator is very much a Xalavier Nelson Jr. game.
Such a good name.
But something like that doesn't come into being without sort of the lead design / programming collaborator on there that I worked with. His name is Sam Chiat. I talk about Sam when I went to GDC and talked about Space Warlord. As much as people want to attribute everything in a Strange Scaffold game to me, and as much as I do in some way, shape, or form touch, alter, or direct each piece of the experience to get that holistic perspective,
Yeah.
in terms of studio visibility, I try to really spread around that attention,
Mhm.
and because otherwise it does become a one-man band
Yeah.
that feels weird sometimes, because people are like, huh, this game doesn't this game feels different. It's because a key member of your staff left because they didn't feel appreciated. Even if they were a core piece of developing something that added to the final feel of the game, you never spoke about them. That was just your genius idea that they managed to come up with because of your superior leadership and direction. That's not how I work. So I think the first part of ethical authorship is visibility, talking about your collaborators and about the people who make your work possible as consistently and constantly as you can.
Yeah.
The second part is, as I mentioned, process. So a Strange Scaffold game, as much as, again, it's a big piece of me, we try very intentionally in our construction of the development processes to have both specific pieces of the game that people can put on their portfolio and use to say, I made the game better through this specific avenue, as well as on a more comprehensive level. Again, just going back to Sam Chiat, or actually, I'm going to use a different example. Julia Minamata.
Mhm.
Julia Minamata has been working, is a developer who has been doing pixel art for this game called The Crimson Diamond for I think like 5+ years now. It's period accurate CGA, if I remember correctly. People might not think to hire Julia Minamata for other things, but I happened to meet Julia through an industry event, and I said, "Hey, there's something I want to do in a specific way for our character portraits. Can you do something like that?"
Yeah.
And the first test of me just kind of speaking to a friend and saying, "Hey, is this kind of thing possible?" I was like, "Oh, you're the person. You can just do that." And so having on a more comprehensive level the entire statement of what Space World Organ Training Simulator is, once Julia demonstrated not only being a fantastic collaborator and member of the team, I had a couple of initial alien concepts, and I was like, "Hey, Julia, just come up with cool stuff because you've got a wildly creative brain. You can own having ideas
Yeah.
within this wider vision that I'm
Mhm.
constructing, and I will literally build the narrative around the aliens you build." So Julia sent over a bunch of alien sketches and ideas, and I was like, yeah, great. This doesn't fit for these reasons. Very specific feedback, so that
Mm-mm.
uh, it isn't
True, much
just,
appreciated.
I don't like that. That
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah.
fit.
That's not helpful. Yeah. Waste everyone's time.
Space World Organ Training Simulator, on an individual level, I can Julia can point at those portraits and say I did that, but also on a more comprehensive level, I built this environment where Julia's work and autonomy was able to have a much larger fingerprint on the game as a whole. And for every project, that balance is going to be different. For every collaborator, that balance can be a little bit different. Sometimes you're just making tables for a game.
Yeah.
No real way to get around that
Mhm.
outside of the Unity Asset Store, which comes in handy quite often.
Shout out.
But the specific calibration and having that as a core principle and priority of the studio allows for that to even be present and possible.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I was gonna say we've been talking about a lot of the potential pitfalls of running a studio like this, but I also want to focus on the strengths of running a studio like this, right? The immediate strengths that you get from running a studio like this and not any other way. The diversity in perspectives, talent, and skills that you get from having a pool of 78, 77 people, you said.
Not including external partners. Yeah,
Not
there's a lot
including
of people,
external.
and I'm very tired.
So like the benefits of having those perspectives and some stories that you can give us. So you already gave us one story, right, of the pixel art on the organ training simulator game. Maybe you can talk about a few more of the positives, the benefits of having such a diverse perspectives on the team.
Absolutely. Quite simply, when you have a wider range of people in the room, especially for a vision that's supposed to be singular, you just get to, kind of like a diamond, you get to turn it different ways. You get to examine different facets because your vision is being reflected through yet another person, yet another facet, yet another angle. So I'm trying to think of a really good example of this. We found that sort of the ideal strange scaffold collaborator is someone who can both exist within an environment of firm, strong direction, but also can provide their own, once they've been informed of that vision and received feedback from that direction, can extrapolate that forward into their own workflow. So El Paso Elsewhere, our primary program design collaborator, programming design collaborator Romero Bonacausen,
Mhm.
a lot of the key features of that game, including what you saw in that trailer,
Mhm.
which is if you're jumping in the air and you hit the dive button, you can do a wall kick
Yeah, I saw
and
that was so cool.
in slow motion be moving forward. That emerged from a bug. Uh, we were testing a variety of things. Romero has a fantastic sense of game feel and of scoping
Yeah.
and design, and said, "Hey, can I keep this in? This looks really cool." And I said, "Yeah, absolutely, of course. You get it. You get it." Uh, the for Julia Minamata talking about the initial portraits and then having all the character portraits going forward emerge from that central place, from her perspective alongside my own. The Airport for Aliens, currently run by Dogs Project, where Tom Vanita, who I'm now also collaborating with on uh, Teenage Demon Slayer Society,
Some footage for
one of
that.
its
Let's
key
put that up.
features is that you can pet any dog at any time with an infinite number of hands. And that came from me and Tom talking and collaborating. And at one point he says, "Hey, there's two ways I can implement petting. Option number one, you can hit the pet button and it can pet the dog, and then once that timer cooldown is expired, you can pet the dog again. Or I can remove the limiter, and every time I hit this button, stuff can just happen, uh, and we can attach a random game object to that hand, so actually you're petting it with different hands." And I was like, "Yeah, cool, great." Operates within vision, but also self-generating uh, concepts. It feels exponentially powerful, and it's because it is also coming from this realm of very specific focus and scoping.
Yeah.
We get to make really ambitious big games that would
Mhm.
cost way more and take way more time anywhere else for a fraction of the time, money, and budget, while paying people well and
Yeah.
having a flexible work schedule. It's kind of terrifying considering working anywhere else after having Strange Scaffold exist and then exist successfully.
Mhm.
It's part of the reason we can, to your point, you're talking about the pool of people that flexibility allows for. We hire people you couldn't get for love or money, uh, across the medium from all kinds of disciplines,
Yeah.
because they see what we do and how we do it, and they connect with it.
Yeah.
They find a home, a haven for creativity, even if it's just for one project or just for a few hours every week.
Yeah.
And it's addictive to see people not just make pieces of a product, but contribute to projects in a way that they also personally grow and
It fulfills them.
experience fulfillment.
Yeah.
Exactly. I can speak about drawbacks all day. That's something I'm trying to be very transparent with in talking about how Strange Scaffold functions. It's not perfect. I am tired and sick and speaking on a Unity Tale stream and glad to do it. But also, even for myself, the fact that projects that would otherwise be inherently risky or unprofitable. An Airport for Aliens, currently run by Dogs, an open world comedy adventure game starring stock photos where you travel a universe of airports, solving the problems of these virtual pets, as well as maintaining a healthy long distance relationship with your partner, who is alongside yourself, the last human being in the world. That's a hell of a pitch to try to take to a publisher and get published. And then
Right.
to have the massive risk of, say, a $500,000 investment, and he needs to make back that money and recoup it so
Yeah.
that your studio can survive. Detaching it from all these different interests, I get to explore so many different pieces of myself and so
Mhm.
many different concepts and ideas, and learn what to do and what not to do, and who I work with well and who I don't work with well,
Yeah.
and under what conditions that changes. It feels like I'm learning at hyperspeed, and
Right.
the
I can
advantages
imagine.
of not Strange Scaffold as a model or the constellation model, but specifically individually oriented collaboration. What do you need? What do your collaborators need? And how does that change the process of how you've organized your studio and how you make your games? That coming together. I am still alive in video games past the 3 to 5 year cutoff. I've shipped more games, even discarding my freelance work, which is prolific. I've shipped more games under the Strange Scaffold banner than most of my peers and mentors will get the opportunity to ship in their entire lives.
Yeah.
I
77 and counting.
get that from our processes.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
It would take a hell of a thing to sell that capability.
Right. And I just want to say credit to you in terms of what you're talking about with how you work with your teammates. Something I was hearing without you saying it was trust. Right. There, it feels like there's a lot of trust there, and that seems to be a key part of the deal that's going on between you and your teammates. In that, when it comes, like you give the example of the wall jump feature, and you allow your team to be themselves, do the thing you brought them on to do, rather than micromanage. And I guess that's also part of what allows you to scale to such a large number of projects at the same time, is that you trust the people you're working with.
I've also got, frankly, a fantastic production in what we call an infrastructure team. So I personally manage these 78 people and do biz dev and work with external partners and manage those relationships. And supporting me in doing that is what we call this infrastructure team, which is roughly 8 people, all of whom have some of them are specifically producing projects. So I used to also do production on our projects. I love production. I clearly love assembling processes.
Yeah.
But when I think we hit our peak of 9 games last year, that's not feasible for one person to keep in their heads at all times, especially doing that justice. So folks like Amanda Farrow, who was the lead producer on Sunshine Shuffle, have been absolutely fundamental and core to us being able to do all the things we do. There's some people at the studio who are what we call operations producers. That's Leanne Bradbury and H.N. Hoffman at the moment. And they wrestle with platform backends so that I don't have to. They fill out forms for awards and juries, and they got together the videos that y'all needed for B-roll for the stream, because I'm one man with limited time. And
that stuff takes a lot of time.
I am tired, and that's all individual pieces of organizing and constructing a studio that all has to get done by somebody. So the trust and the joy I have of having people I can trust to be able to take a variety of things off my back so I can set high level direction and do the things I am best at doing while enabling and supporting my teammates, and then finding ways to enable and support those people as they work. Because for a while we had less producers, but I was like, hey, we need redundancy and producers to produce the producers as well if we want to give everyone the same level of compassion and support. And working from our values, sometimes it's tough. Sometimes there's incredibly life-changing or attractive deals that we can't take or that we don't get because of our philosophy. It's worth the trade-off.
So be it. And I love that there's redundancy by design in your studio. That's really interesting.
Except for me, because I want bodyguards.
Exactly. There's only one Xalavier. There's a lot of questions that have been coming in from the chat, and I want to take the chance to ask some of those, right? So I'm not mispronouncing their name. It's spelled this way. Ozymandias asks, as a small studio, How does Strange Scaffold manage to market their games other than being on Unity Tales, of course?
Of course. We use Twitter, we use TikTok, we actually operate from values and priorities as far as our marketing as well, because there are dozens of things you can be doing at any one moment to market your game. In fact, according to a lot of sources, you should be doing them right now. Why aren't you writing a Steam update post? Why aren't you doing a TikTok? Why aren't you doing a Twitter? All of those things, again, take time, often take money, even if it's just the piece of your day that you aren't getting compensated for making that dance to TikTok. So hopefully you get 3 more wish lists on your game. The core of Strange Scaffold's marketing strategy to date has been, first of all, not just promoting one game, but promoting the overall perspective and philosophy in studio. So because we make so many things, and because people are learning to identify a Xalavier Nelson Jr. game, a Strange Scaffold game, we get that benefit of, hey, it's another thing they're doing. I like the other 6 things they've done. I'm going to wish list it.
Yes.
Making games, the process of making games themselves and revealing them and announcing them and releasing them gets to become multiplicative in a way that you don't get to observe if you have one title that you've been working on for 5 years and your entire studio hinges on that succeeding and reaching people.
Right.
The second thing we did is operating from values, which is, quite frankly, our marketing works because it works with our brains. So I don't do Instagram because it doesn't work with how my brain works. I don't make content that it fits well for Instagram or YouTube. I could be doing YouTube game dev blog diaries. I could be doing a stream. I should be doing more Twitch streams, more YouTube streams, more of everything. But it's really easy for me to make TikToks. It's really easy for me to do Twitter posts. For me specifically to do
You lean
that.
into what works for you.
We lean into what works with us. We recently also brought on a social media content creator and community manager named Maddie Pelkey, who, again, for the areas that I'm weaker in, or I don't have capacity to jump into my own game builds anymore and just do a funny thing because I need to be coordinating with someone who's in Japan at like 9 a.m. or something, or like 12 p.m. Or 12 a.m. So Maddie captures game footage and other things from across the studio from the game dev process that I don't have time to anymore as much as I have the desire or the will. So and a lot of that came from talking as we were interviewing people for that position, learning that Maddie had the exact skill set and desire and philosophy that would make that an enjoyable job for her. So doing what works well for us and for our brains, operating from those values, it hasn't failed us yet. The only thing it has done is just left a little bit of residual guilt of like, dang, I should really do more Twitch stuff. Probably. Maybe.
This is the start, you know?
I should do more Twitch. There's limited time. So
of course.
we accept that we cannot market as much as other studios, but we use the space capacity that we do have very efficiently and as effectively as we can. We try to punch above our weight.
Amazing. The Bull asks, do you find a lot of success on TikTok compared to your other platforms? Well, I guess you're not so much on other platforms, but do you find a lot of success on TikTok, I guess?
TikTok has gone well for us. It's because we've leaned into the voice that I have and because of my ability to make those TikToks. We're going to start a studio TikTok soon. It will be interesting to see how that goes as we just, outside of my own voice and my own way of promoting games, have one that's just the company's games, just from a slightly different, an adjacent but different voice. That'll be interesting to see how that goes. Success is subjective. It's based off of your goals. It's based off of your needs. So we have eyeballs on TikTok. I think I've got over, I think I've got several thousand followers. How many followers is it now? It's a
What's your TikTok? Let's drop a link to it in the chat. We'll get our
it,
moderator to do that. Trey in the chat.
it's at Rit Nelson. Yeah, we're at 27.4 thousand followers, which is pretty good. On
Nice.
TikTok. I don't know how much that converts to wish lists and to people who are buying the games, but we're advocating for more than selling games, frankly. So
Oh, nice.
every eyeball, every retweet, every like or repost matters, and we're trying to be loud about making games better, faster, cheaper, and healthier, because we think that although not everyone can or should do it the same way, I think everyone can do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we're gonna drop that link. So follow the TikTok, everyone who's watching right now. Get on that. Let's get that number up. Another question: Hypernoodle_games asks, in these projects where Xalavier is the single unifying part, is Xalavier always taking similar roles in those projects, narrative, director, what have you, or does the context of the work for Xalavier change in each project?
It's different in each project. For some, I'm mainly just doing writing. For some, I'm working actively in engine for days or weeks at a time. It's always different. So the role in general is the same, of project direction, scoping, process, overall design and structure of the thing, as well as the narrative piece. But how much of each piece I'm doing and how much I get to work in Unity, which enables our creativity, is always different. On Sunshine Shuffle, that was the first time we had significant writing support. Kawatiano, who started as a producer in the studio, is now doing production for Friday Night Funkin'. Hunter Bond and Amanda Farrow all contributed writing to the game that I then edited within the game's overall voice and for my goals for the project to put into the final version. And the game would not have the critically acclaimed writing that it has and touch on as many subject material, as many pieces of subject material as it does, without their perspective also having been present in the narrative layer. Right. So for other games, I do all the writing, all of it, and I feel very strongly about doing it.
Yeah.
Other times I don't. And opening up those doors to what my role means in terms of enabling and supporting a team while really constructing and maintaining that core vision, that's something, I'll be honest, I'm learning every day.
Mm-hmm. It's from my perspective, playing your games and hearing your story, I see a parallel where like Strange Scaffold, it's kind of like this constellation that's built around you, and then I would say the games themselves, I feel like the writing carries them forward in a sense. It's just so good. The writing is so good, and I implore people to check out all your games. There's a link tree in the description, and really enjoy the writing. And there's a lot of writing. I noticed any opportunity you have to write something somewhere, you will take. Right, like in Sunshine's Shuffle, which I want to talk about, since it just came out. You can go to the shop, and every single item has a unique line of text. Every item you can buy, and all of them made me giggle or laugh or something. Right? It's so good. It makes you want to look at every item, even if you're not gonna buy it, just to see what it's a whale that sells the items, by the way, Seymour. So yeah, it's really entertaining, and that's a game that just came out, right? You just launched. Congratulations! I would love to hear more about that project, and we have some footage for the game, so we'll play that as B-roll. But yeah, what was that process like? Was this a larger project? Was it smaller in scope? How many people did you work with on it? What was the experience overall, and how's it going since launch?
Big series of questions.
Yeah, basically all of them. Go for it. Start where you want, end where you want. You're good.
Sunshine Shuffle is a fusion of Animal Crossing and Poker Night at the Inventory, where
Nice.
12 years ago, a group of adorable animals robbed the largest bank on the eastern seaboard, and now they're telling you how and why they did it over a series of games of cards
Uh-huh.
so that they don't get executed by the mafia. Also, you get to decorate their boat. So the entire experience uh, and nexus of that project in a number of major forums is impacted by folks, including our lead programmer, design collaborator on that one, Stav Hinensen, who did a great article on GameDeveloper.com actually about how difficult this game was to make,
Mm.
because strange scaffold games at their best tend to exist as a high concept. It's like an airport for aliens currently run by dogs. We fully fulfill that concept, to your point. Like every place where there can or should be writing, there's writing. Every place in Space Warlord Organ Trading Simulator where we make capitalism just a little bit more horrifying, we take it. But at the end of the day, the thing that makes those games magical is that the concept has been fulfilled and done justice. Sunshine Shuffle is a unique form of game where, because it has to be completely seamless or it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. Right.
The entire game isn't just its concept, it is heavily execution and polish focused. So it took 2.5 years to make. For the first 2 years and 4 months, the characters did not hold cards in their hands, or they didn't hold it at the right time, or they put down their cards or they would hold more cards than they should, or the cards would overlap or the cards would overlap and like start Z fighting.
Yeah.
Characters holding cards and the immense design challenge that was, because it's essentially the immersive sim of narrative games. The narrative layer has to be completely seamless and exist in perfect harmony with the poker layer, and those things have to be overlapping concurrently. And you have to be, for example, telling a really dramatic story while the player is thinking, or at least also absorbing, a entire poker game which is not being manipulated in any way, is just existing systemically.
Yeah.
It's a nightmare. It's probably,
But it's impressive.
if not the hardest game, if not the hardest dev cycle I've ever been a part of.
Wow.
One of the hardest.
And how long?
That took 2.5 years.
Okay. Yeah.
That was supposed to be small. It got bigger.
Right.
Because we didn't know what we had stepped into. We were like, it's just a visual novel connected to a poker game. How hard could it be? And we talked to Telltale people. And we said, hey, how did you do this? And they told us how they did it. What they didn't tell us until years later was, oh yeah, that game scarred everyone who touched it. That was really, really hard. It's one of the hardest things we ever built. You know, us, the people who made The Walking Dead. Yeah, that was harder. That hearing that, I wished I had heard that 2 years before. But we got to pull off a game that literally only one other studio in the medium has managed to do.
Yeah.
It's a genre that only has 2 games, both made by Telltale. May it rest in peace, and may its resurrection in various forms go well. So the process of making Sunshine Shuffle was agonizing and laborious. We pulled off something unprecedented that we're very proud of, and it now exists on PC and on Nintendo Switch, and has gotten really great reviews, both from players as well as critics. Our refund rate is really low, which is not what I was expecting at all, because if you're coming in for cute animal shenanigans, we're telling a neo-noir crime story using these visuals with like heart and nuance and unexpected gut punches. So I was expecting people to come in and be like, yeah, no, absolutely not. I was hoping that wouldn't be the case, but I was expecting higher refund rate. Typical refund rate on Steam, you can expect, especially for a shorter game or something that's narrative focused, something between uh say 10 to 15%.
Okay.
We're below that.
Nice.
So yeah, people are buying it and not refunding it,
That's a good thing.
and they're reviewing it well, and they're appreciating that we did this tonal dissonance, and that tonal dissonance apparently worked for them. So
Yeah.
it was
People want to
hard,
support good games, you know?
but we're glad we're glad it paid off.
It's really unique. It's really cool. Whether or not you play, you know how to play Texas Hold'em, the game will teach you. If you don't, and if you do, you're gonna love it. Like you're gonna jump right. You're gonna hit the ground running, jump right in. It's super entertaining. I loved how like it doesn't interrupt the gameplay. They're kind of happening simultaneously, as you said, was very hard to achieve, but I think it was worth it. It was really worth it. So great work. I'm curious. You said you you're happy that you get to still jump into the editor. You get to still jump into Unity. You get to still, regardless of all, like you have to touch so many things. You spend a lot of time writing. I'm sure you do that. You're writing out, maybe outside of the editor, maybe sometimes inside. I'm not sure, but I would love to.
Based on the project. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So I would love to learn more about your relationship with Unity, whether it's you working on it or with collaborators going over things in the editor, your relationship with the tool over the multitude of projects you've created. I'd just love to hear a bit more about that. Oh, and also we're dropping links to Sunshine Shuffle in the chat. Get on that right now. The Steam link is in the chat. So before we move on, so go ahead.
So my relationship with Unity is I deeply value how Unity, for a studio that's so built on process, Unity doesn't have a single prescribed direction of what I have to do or how I have to do it. We can organize our tools and our workflow on a very individual basis based on the game. So we made a game called Witch Strandings at one point, where it is a 2D experimental open world game where you are a spirit of light tending to a forest which has been corrupted by a witch, and taking care of the transformed animals within its environs in this very Ghibli inspired dark fairy tale. And the way you do that is entirely with your mouse. So if you move your mouse here, you physically embody your mouse cursor. It's a digital force that extends beyond the borders of your screen. So when you move your mouse this much, your spirit of light moves that much. Move it this much, it moves that much. Go through some quicksand, you slowly crawl your mouse up so you don't sink into the quicksand. Or if you are trying to get past some rushing rapids, you're quickly moving your mouse around. So when we were considering making that game, it's based off of some of the core principles in technology and Space World and Organ Training Simulator. Same lead designer, collaborator on that of Sam Chiat, as well as Ben Chandler, who did quite a few of the core pieces of especially the environment. And Julia Minamata, again, handled the character portraits of the creatures in the forest. And the entire game existing as essentially an inventory grid that extends to the point of an open world. So phrases were thrown around very early in development as we started to explore the technical issues of, say, millions of game objects, or would melt any computer made within our lifetime. It's like, okay, how are we going to do that? And Unity enabled us to do that. Not only to make a game that can really embody a mouse-only adventure, but we were able to, within the scope of what Unity provides, essentially make a system where the game hallucinates where everything should be. So technically nothing actually exists in the game outside of like maybe 30 things, and that's 30 game objects, and then everything else is a hallucination that doesn't exist. It made us very existentially tired and scared working on this video game. And Unity enabled that. Unity in general enables you to build your own preferred workflow. And any engine has things that you discover as you use it that are optimizations you didn't realize, or, oh, all future Unity projects, I should do this.
Yeah.
But in general, I can't say enough good about how Unity has for projects in 3D, projects in 2D, projects that, again, do not exist but are just hallucinations that that are contained within your computer screen. Unity makes that possible, and Unity does that for a lot of developers. So my relationship with the engine over time is going from Twine, from text-only tools, to eventually being coached on how to use Unity by Tom Vanita on the very first string scaffold game in Airport for Aliens, currently run by Dogs. I have continually fell more in love with what Unity lets me do next.
Amazing. And I love how it's tied to the structure of your studio too, where you're all teaching each other as well. It's a great way to learn through community. And I advise everyone to go out and do that. Find your community. If you have one, if you're lucky enough to be in a place that has that kind of community, then try to find a community where you can all give and teach each other, and you learn rapidly.
There's one of my favorite things about having multiple game development timelines running at the same time, and largely working within the same engine as well, is that it's helped us radically when it comes to store assets as well, because Unity store assets are built by creators for creators, and whether it will be the best choice for your game compared to a different asset, often you don't know until you've already gone all the way through making the game. So you get a cutscene asset from the store, and it's like, oh, it has these great use cases, but for my specific use on the specific game I'm working on, here is one thing that makes it a giant pain, and you just have to live with that for the rest of your dev cycle.
Right.
Because we're making multiple games at once, we have 6 games going concurrently right now inside the studio, one of them being a co-development. The way we've been able to utilize Unity and the power of community is we use an asset like Super Text Mesh, and we're like, this is great, we're going to use this in everything we do. Or we use a different asset like Fleece. No, it's not Fleece, it's Fungus. Fungus is a visual novel creator on the store. We hooked its conversation engine and choice branches, whatever else, to a 3D open world physics-based comedy game, which is perhaps a little bit of hubris. We did that for an Airport for Aliens, currently run by Dogs, and in the process of making that game, we were like, oh, here's the best uses of Fungus. Here's where we don't want to use Fungus in the future.
Yeah, right.
And being able to share the best assets that we found, new assets we found, and how we've found the advantages and disadvantages of things on the asset store. First of all, I do highly recommend people use the asset store and use the power of community, but also, to go back to a lot of my points, the more things you make, the more you learn about how Unity can be the best tool for your creativity and how a specific asset can support the specific next thing you want to make. So
right.
Make more things.
Especially early, right? Like make a lot early when you're first starting out. You want to just get it all out there. Get all those ideas out there. You mentioned earlier, you're like, I got all my bad words out in the beginning,
most
right?
of them, hopefully.
Well, hopefully, yes. I mean, I can say you got most of them out. So speaking of like teaching people and learning through community, Ozzy Miandius in the chat says, I remember watching streams of Xalavier making witch strandings on Unity. It inspired me to get serious about learning Unity. So that's somebody in the chat. So that's really sweet. That's awesome.
I didn't think that people were really watching those streams. So that means a lot.
There you go. Yeah. So it's about that time where we do a little. Actually, wait, no. Speaking of learning, I want to mention something that you're going to be a part of. So there's a webinar. If you want more, Xalavier, there's going to be another webinar that you're doing, right? It's about bringing your game from PC to Xbox, and you're going to be one of the panelists on that. On June 20th, we're going to drop a link in the chat to that. So it's going to be you, Madison Carr, Mikhail Fredborg, and maybe more people. I'm not sure, but go check it out. We're going to drop the link to that, and you can sign up for that webinar. Just in case you forgot, Xalavier, you're part of another webinar with us. Just a reminder.
I didn't forget.
In case you didn't have enough things to do, you know?
And speaking of things that Unity does, I don't want to sound like I'm just shilling for the engine. I genuinely love what it's enabled. We're using Unity HDRP on El Paso Elsewhere
awesome.
too.
And the game looks great, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We literally, at the start of the project, went through every lighting setup that Unity has, and sometimes people complain about how many different rendering pipelines Unity has. Every rendering pipeline is different and has different capabilities and advantages, and gives your game a different look, a fundamentally different look. And we, at the beginning of the project, I can show or share at some point, we went through every variant of how different rendering pipelines would impact.
Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. Okay.
And where we landed was HDRP. So
let's go.
I'm grateful for HDRP, Unity's range of choice, as well as for how HDRP has allowed us to take low poly principles and kind of like an early PS2 vibe, and elevate that way beyond the scope of that original technology and era.
Right. Like modernizing that classic look. I love it. And that's the thing.
Let us bring it to consoles.
Yes, exactly. Multi-platform. We've got a lot of multi-platform content coming out this month and the next month. So if you want to learn more about that, just follow us on Twitter, Instagram here. There's going to be a lot of that content coming out. It's time for the lightning round.
Let's do it.
It's time for the lightning round. Gonna throw some good questions, some bad questions at you, and you can answer as fast as you can, but no pressure. First one's the hardest one, so or maybe the easiest one, depending. Let's go. Top 5 games of all time.
Oh no!
Yeah, that's a hard one. That's what I said, but the rest are easier. But I gotta know.
Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild.
Ooh,
really high up there.
Yeah.
Def Jam Fight for NY.
Oh, amazing game.
King Kong.
Yes.
The real ones know what's up with Peter Jackson's King Kong.
Okay.
Star Wars Battlefront 2 by Pandemic.
Yes.
And finally, how many was that? That's 4?
Yeah.
5th one. Every other game is going to fall into the sea based off of what I choose next. I can only preserve one more game for the end of the world. We're going to go with... In My Heart Says Black by Criterion. Criterion, the developers of Burnout, applied their perspective to a first-person shooter.
Mm-hmm.
So it is obsessed with deeply kinetic gunplay and what it means to fire a weapon and make that as exciting as driving a car. It's
right.
wild.
Oh, that's a pitch and a half.
That's what my heart says, but what my brain says, and what deserves to be in there is Minecraft.
Oh, nice, cool.
Changed the nature of creativity for a lot of people. If you played Minecraft, you've probably played several hours of it, because you can't not play several hours.
Yeah. Oh, that's a killer list. All right, so we got to keep moving though.
Yes.
First game you remember playing?
First game I remember playing is either Shenmue or Jedi Power Battles on the Dreamcast.
Oh, Shenmue is very appropriate. That makes sense. First Unity tool.
Favorite
Unity tool.
Favorite Unity tool, inside the engine or as part of the assets?
Inside the engine, let's say.
Love the Inspector. I love the Inspector.
Okay, perfect. Mario or Luigi?
Luigi.
Oh, Nice. Upcoming,
No
you gotta
hesitation.
gotta show the green man some love. Upcoming game you're most excited about right now?
Upcoming game I'm most excited about right now. Armored Core 6?
Oh yes, yes.
I'm excited to see some Armored Core. I have no idea what Armored Core is gonna look like these days, but I trust
been a
From
while.
Software to
It's been a
figure it
while.
out. I would have said Tears of the Kingdom or something, but like
But it's out.
a lot of my most anticipated games are already coming out.
Perfect. Which of your side projects are you most excited about right now?
Which of my side projects am I most excited about right now that I can talk about? Probably Teenage Demon Slayer Society, which we
Awesome.
just announced.
Which we showed some footage of.
Character action tactics game.
Looks cool.
It gives us also a fantastic technology base inside of Unity to do more turn-based experiments and games that take the turn-based genre in a new direction. I'm really excited for it.
Amazing. And you can wishlist that on Steam, right?
Yes, you can.
Check that out. Should. Drop a link to it in Steam right now.
Please wishlist it on Steam right now. I've been on the stream for 2 hours and I'm so sick. I need you to wishlist it on the Steam right now.
Do it. Do it.
And that was a sneak preview of my dad who's visiting.
There you go, sneak peek. Part of the constellation model or no?
He is actually now an official part of the constellation model.
Incredible. Yeah. Okay. Shout out another creator who you think would be amazing for this series.
Grace Bruxner.
Grace Bruxner. Well, very good. Cats or dogs?
Detective, yeah.
Yes, we've actually. That's crazy that you said that because we've actually been talking about that. So cats or dogs?
Cats.
Okay. If you couldn't be a game dev, what would you be?
Children's librarian. This is what I did before.
That's amazing.
And I still adore it.
Oh, okay. AI, yay or nay?
AI depends.
Depends. Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. There we go. That was the lightning round. Thank you. You did a great job. So for the outro, we usually go. What we do is we'll ask whoever's on to give us some advice or final takeaways from your journey so far for the people watching, aspiring game developers. Maybe like it can be whatever you want, but it could be related to what people can learn maybe from your constellation model. They can learn from your journey so far. Yeah. What is one takeaway you have for people watching?
If I had to give people one takeaway who are watching this right now, I would say the standard ways of doing things. If there is one thing I've learned in my journey across so many video games and across a surprising number of years given my age, it is that the standard way of doing things is not standard because it is best. Often, behind the scenes, you'll learn ways that the standard way of doing things is failing people. It's failing people financially. It's failing people logistically. It might not make fundamental sense, but someone somewhere is propagating and perpetuating the idea that this is the way things are done. This is the way we make video games. This is the way you make a studio. This is the type of person who can make a studio. You, in this moment in time, thanks to tools like Unity, can challenge all of those notions of standardization, of who gets to make a video game and how they get to do it. Don't accept standard, particularly if it doesn't make sense, as mandatory. Take it as a suggestion, value where it comes from, look at it with open eyes, and choose your own course forward. Because many times, the standard path isn't built to keep you personally going, and your personal long-term journey of creativity is what's going to both benefit yourself as well as our medium of games.
There we go. Xalavier, thank you so much. This has been amazing. You've been a professional, a gentleman, and a pro. Appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been an honor.
It's been a lot of fun, and we need to have you back. Hopefully when El Paso Elsewhere comes out, we can do a little creator spotlight, maybe dive into that game.
Yep.
Yes, let's go. You can wishlist that too. It's all on Steam. Wishlist everything. We have the link tree in the description, so check that out. Everybody who asked your questions, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for watching. Thanks for sticking with us. I saw your names there the entire time. Really appreciate it. Thanks for sticking with us. It's been a lot of fun. Make sure to join us next week for another creator spotlight. We'll see you around. Ciao,
See you around,
everyone.
folks. Take care.